Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're unpacking a really fascinating lecture by Dr. George Payton, and it's all about the massive, often invisible challenges of Bible translation. We usually think of translation as just a simple word matching game, right? Like you just swap out an English word for a Spanish one or a Swahili one and call it a day. But as we're going to see, it is actually this deep, incredibly complex cultural detective process. We are going to decode the hidden layers of language today and figure out exactly how translators manage to bridge these huge cultural gaps to bring ancient texts to life. Okay, let's just dive right now.
So, I want to start by asking you a quick question. Imagine I just casually said this sentence to you. He bought a ring for his girlfriend. Now, tell me, when he proposes, which knee does he kneel on? I'm betting almost every single one of you instantly pictured him dropping down on his right knee. But hold on a second. Take a look at that sentence again. Did I say engagement ring? Nope. Did I even say the word proposal? I really didn't. And yet, in a fraction of a second, those few words triggered this vast, totally unspoken encyclopedic database in your brain. You basically filled in the entire sequence of events, the romance, even the guy's exact posture, just relying on shared cultural knowledge.
Now, think about how fragile that mental picture actually is. Let's compare that first sentence to this one. He bought a ring for his fiancée. We literally changed one single word, but the entire cultural frame just completely shifted. I mean, a fiancé is someone who has already been proposed to, right? So suddenly, this isn't some dramatic surprise restaurant proposal anymore. This is just a practical, post-proposal shopping trip where they're probably picking out wedding bands together. Just one word completely rewrites the entire unspoken background story.
Section 1. Hidden layers of language. So, this lightning-fast, automatic assumption-making that we do in everyday conversation, that is exactly the challenge translators face. They don't just translate words, they have to translate these invisible layers of culture hiding right beneath the text. And a key concept to understand here is something called collocation. Collocation basically just refers to the other words that co-locate, or, hang out, in the same sentence as the word you're looking at. Dr. Payton points out that the company a word keeps instantly triggers a very specific meaning and cultural frame of reference. Just seeing the words boyfriend, ring, and girlfriend sitting next to each other immediately fires up that marriage proposal frame in our minds.
Section 2. The cryptic nature of words.
Because we all share this cultural background, our everyday language basically operates as a super efficient shorthand code. And this brilliantly shows why you absolutely cannot just translate things word for word. Let's take the English word make. If I tell you, Jane made up a list, you instantly picture her checking her pantry, writing down groceries. But if I say, John made up with Jane, the whole scenario instantly flips to say, a romantic apology with flowers. And if I say, John made out like a bandit, well, he didn't literally build a bandit, and he definitely didn't reconcile with one. It's an idiom, meaning he was highly successful at something. You have to translate the complete cultural unit, not just the isolated words.
So the absolute crucial takeaway here is that language is cryptic and it's inferential. It's heavily condensed, and we are constantly having to infer what the speaker actually means based on these shared cultural databases. Dr. Payton uses this great example of yellow buses. In America, if someone just mentions yellow buses, you immediately infer school children, morning pickups, afternoon drop-offs. Why? Because no other buses are painted that specific shade of yellow. It's just this unspoken rule that everyone inherently knows.
Section 3. Translating clean into Swahili.
All right, we are going to put this theory to the test right now with a very specific biblical text. Over in the Gospel of Mark, chapter 1, there's this really famous scene. A man suffering from leprosy comes right up to Jesus, falls on his knees, and says, "If you are willing, you can make me clean." Now, in English, the word clean feels pretty straightforward, right? But remember, we have to look for that unspoken cultural context. Let's say we're trying to translate this exact moment into Swahili. Well, Swahili doesn't just have one generic catch-all word for clean. It actually has several, and it completely depends on the context. You've got safisha, which means to clean a house, like by sweeping and dusting. You have osha, which is cleaning something with water, like doing the dishes. Then there's fua, which is exclusively used for washing clothes. And finally, you have takasa, which means to purify ritually, sort of like washing up before entering a mosque. So think about it. Which of those words is the actual correct translation for what the leper is asking for?
Section 4. Unspoken rules in ancient texts.
To solve that Swahili translation puzzle, we actually have to dig up the unwritten cultural rules of the ancient world. In the first-century Jewish world, leprosy wasn't just treated as a medical condition. In their minds, it was this massive issue of ritual purity, completely based on the book of Leviticus. The normal, absolutely unwritten rule was that if you touch something unclean, like a dead body or someone with leprosy, you instantly become unclean yourself. But the text says Jesus physically reached out and touched the man. The sheer cultural shock of this moment is that Jesus completely bypassed the taboo. Because Jesus is holy, the exception to the rule was triggered. Something incredibly holy touching the unclean doesn't contract impurity. It actually transmits holiness and makes the unclean thing pure.
So right after healing him, Jesus tells the man to go show himself to the priest. Now, why would he do that? Dr. Payton actually compares this ancient requirement to strict modern COVID-19 government testing and quarantine rules. Think back to the height of the pandemic. If you were sick, you couldn't just casually tell your boss you felt better and show up to work. You needed a proper medical authority to officially test you and clear you to re-enter society. These Levitical laws were basically the ancient equivalent of that strict mandated quarantine clearance.
And this journey wasn't just a quick pop into the local doctor. It literally meant traveling 100 miles to Jerusalem to find a priest, because that was the only authority who could officially declare him ritually pure. He had to go through this intense, week-long process of washing and sacrifices, which eventually culminated in hosting a feast to prove to his entire community that he was safe to live among them again. So with all of that unspoken context finally revealed, our Swahili translation puzzle is totally solved. The leper wasn't just asking for a bath, he was asking for deep ritual restoration back into his family and his society. Because of that, takasa, meaning to ritually purify, is the only word that actually works.
Let's mentally storyboard another mystery from the sources, using that exact same cultural detective method. Over in Mark chapter 5, Jesus is walking through this incredibly tightly packed crowd, just getting bumped and jostled by everyone. Suddenly, he stops dead in his tracks and asks, "Who touched me?" It turns out a woman who had been suffering from a hemorrhage for 12 long years had actively pushed her way through the masses just to touch the edge of his cloak. And then the text gives us this incredibly dramatic quote. The woman, fearing and trembling, aware of what had happened to her, came, fell down before him, and told him the whole truth. Now, I want you to look really closely at the gap in that text. It explicitly says she was aware of what had happened to her, and that this awareness terrified her. But the text doesn't actually say what she was so terrified of. So why the sudden massive panic attack?
Well, here are the unspoken stakes, the deep cultural background that the original readers inherently understood without being told. Because of her hemorrhage, she had actually been ritually unclean for 12 entire years. So by desperately pushing her way through that tight crowd, she wasn't just rudely bumping into people. Under their strict purity laws, she was literally ritually infecting a massive crowd of people with impurity. And to top it all off, she committed the ultimate taboo by intentionally touching a holy teacher without getting his permission first. She wasn't just scared of getting yelled at, she was absolutely terrified she was about to face severe societal punishment for breaking the strictest possible customs of her entire world.
Section 5. Bridging the Cultural Divide.
Okay, so how do modern translators actually solve these massive cultural gaps for everyday readers today? Well, they have to do some pretty incredible synthesis work. As Dr. Payton explains, they aren't just staring at Greek or Hebrew grammar all day, they're analyzing the genre of the text, they're carefully mapping out the physical scenarios, and they are intensely studying the overarching cultural discourses, like that pervasive first-century mindset of clean versus unclean. They gather all of this together to properly fill in the blanks for modern readers who obviously don't have the encyclopedic knowledge of a first-century local.
And to bring these unspoken backstories to life, without actually altering the original text, which is key, translators rely on a very specialized toolkit. First, like we just saw with Swahili, they hunt for very carefully chosen target words, like takasa, that naturally carry the exact right cultural weight. Now, if the cultural gap is just too large to bridge with a single word, they'll drop in footnotes to explain the immediate context. And for those massive cultural frameworks, like the really intricate rules of leprosy, they'll build out extensive glossaries at the back of the text so the reader can reference the much larger picture.
Ultimately, the core thesis of this entire explainer boils down to this. We are steeped in culture, and we usually don't even realize it. Translating a text isn't about somehow ignoring our own cultural lenses, but rather recognizing them and actively learning to read the text through the cultural lenses of the original audience. You already do this incredibly complex cultural decoding effortlessly in your own language every single day without even breaking a sweat.
So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. The next time you're having a conversation with someone, try to pay close attention to what's happening right between the lines. Think about it. How much of your daily communication relies entirely on things you never actually say out loud? It turns out the absolute most important parts of our conversations are often the words we completely leave out. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep exploring the hidden layers around you.